The Republican leadership in Congress has made it clear. They will crash the economy next year by threatening the full faith and credit of the United States for the first time in our history, putting the United States in default unless we yield to their demand to cut Social Security and Medicare. It's MAGA trickle down. MAGA trickle down. The kind of policies that have failed the country before and will fail it again.
And it is reckless. It is playing a reckless game with our economy.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, does the embarrassment never, ever, ever end for the Biden administration and the Democrats. And the main messenger / chief propagandist / affirmative action press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, is not really helping them out because she cannot give a clear answer to any questions that are asked of her. And she especially fails when it comes to being called out on the lies of the Democrat Party, because quite honestly, she can't defend those lies, right? She's already just bad at her job in general, but when she gets called out on her lies, she gets even worse, okay? And the mainstream liberal media has started to call Karine Jean-Pierre out on the lies of the Biden administration, the Democrats, because at this point, everybody can see the writing on the wall in regards to the state of this country, especially the economy. And I want you guys to watch Karine Jean-Pierre's answer in response to a reporter essentially calling out Biden as a liar when he discussed how he's supposed to be doing such a great job reducing the deficit and how he's so much better than Republicans at that. Take a look.
Today, the president seemed to be countering some of this GOP messaging on the economy, and he told people that Republicans like to call Democrats big spenders and people should look at the facts. But the facts don't seem to be exactly how he's painting it on some of these issues. He has claimed repeatedly that the administration reduced the deficit, but if you break it down, spending was high because of the pandemic, those programs expired, and that brought down the deficit, and then that deficit reduction was spent on canceling student loans, and then on the jobs claims that he made. He said that President Trump was the first since Hoover to lose jobs during his administration, but and he claimed that he had created 10 million new jobs, but in reality, those jobs have mostly been added back, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics says only about 514,000 jobs have been newly created. So how are people supposed to take this kind of messaging on their most important issue seriously when some of this feels like smoke and mirrors?
Well, let me tell you what the American people should take very, very seriously. Let me remind you of the Trump tax cut of 2017, $2 trillion that was not paid for, so I want to be very clear about that. And let me also remind the American people of what was happening in January of 2020, January 20th or 21 of 2021, which was that American businesses, small businesses were shutting down. I just talked about schools. Only 46% of schools were shut down. There was not a real comprehensive COVID response and making sure that people got shots in their arms. And because of the American Rescue Plan, which is something that Republicans refused to work on, refused to vote on, the American Rescue Plan got those schools open, got those small businesses open again, and really made us and put us in a place where the economy turned back on.
Yeah, so I don't know of a worse liar in politics than the affirmative action press secretary, as we did not need stimulus. We did not need the American Rescue Plan because we were already projected to have record GDP growth coming off of the spending that we did in 2020. And in fact, all of the deficit reduction that Biden is taking credit for has nothing to do with him as much as it has to do with the fact that our pandemic era spending is coming to an end. But I'll let CNN, the mainstream liberal media, actually fact checked the Biden administration and the affirmative action press secretary on this.
So here are the facts. There is no doubt that the deficit has fallen under President Biden so far. It was about $3.1 trillion under President Trump in fiscal 2020. It was about $360 billion lower than that, so about $2.8 trillion in fiscal 2021, mostly under President Biden. But even with that $360 billion decline, Brianna, experts I spoke to still scoffed at the idea that President Biden is personally responsible for having reduced the deficit. In fact, one advocate of deficit reduction, Mark Goldwine of the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, told me that this claim is almost bizarro world, a reversal of reality. Why? Well, because the deficit was expected to fall by more than $360 billion at the time President Biden took office. In fact, at the time, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office had projected that the deficit would fall by more than $870 billion in 2021 if President Biden did not implement new policy. Then President Biden came in and, like most presidents, Brianna, did new policy. There's a $1.9 trillion pandemic relief bill. There was a big bipartisan infrastructure bill. There was an expansion of food stamp benefits. Whatever you think of all those policies, they all cost money. So there ended up being less deficit reduction than expected. Now, President Biden likes to cite a certain economic research firm called Moody's Analytics. Here's what a senior director at Moody's, Dan White, told me last week. He said, the actions of the administration and Congress have undoubtedly resulted in higher deficits, not smaller ones. It is encouraging that the administration has proposed some initiatives to bring down the deficit, but so far, none of those initiatives has been seriously considered. Now, Brianna, people might still be confused. If President Biden's actions have made the deficit higher than it otherwise would be, how has the deficit still fallen at all under President Biden from the end of the Trump era? In short, it's because of temporary pandemic spending. It was scheduled to expire, and it has expired. Basically, there was an explosion of short-term spending in Trump's last year because of pandemic relief programs, and tax revenue collapsed because the economy crashed. The deficit hit a record $3.1 trillion, and that was more than triple what it was the year prior. But because a lot of that 2020 spending was short-term, the deficit was almost certainly going to fall in the coming years, no matter who was president. And so, again, it did end up falling in 2021. But again, it was by less than expected. So when President Biden talks about a projected $1.5 trillion decline in the deficit this year, even if that does happen this year, the deficit would still be higher this year than initially projected when he took office.
Yeah, so the unfortunate reality of the economy, guys, is that I think that we're in a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation, which is kind of bad for Republicans in the sense that we're stuck between hyperinflation and going into the next Great Depression. Now, right now, we are in a recession. And again, the problem is that we need to stop spending money. We're spending way too much money, and we have to stop spending it in order to avoid hyperinflation. However, we can't stop spending money because if we stop spending money, then the whole economic system will collapse because we will not be able to pay our debt service, right? Which, again, is a very, very, very bad situation to be in, right? But hey, I hope that the Republicans can do some things to help us avoid a Great Depression and hyperinflation, which should include limiting the power of the federal government, balancing the federal budget, stopping excess regulation that is retarding production. We need no government bailouts for the banks, and we need to end government corruption, right? That is what I think that Republicans can do in order to hopefully steer our economy in a way that will help us avoid hyperinflation or a Great Depression. But hey, I wouldn't bet money on all of these things happening. So that being said, the next lie that Karine Pierre got called out on is Biden's claim that so-called voter suppression was happening in Georgia, that Georgia's election integrity laws were Jim Crow 2.0. And of course, she melts down and falls flat once again when answering this question because the facts don't necessarily go along with the Democrats' narrative on this issue. Take a look.
Is the White House observing instances of voter suppression in Georgia and other states that adopted some of these laws over the last 2 years?
Look, we have seen ourselves, I just laid out, we've seen ourselves from what legislation, state legislations that we have seen across the country that is suppressing the right to vote. Look, we believe that people should have the fundamental access to voting. As you know, very early in this administration, the president signed an executive order on how what he can do from the federal level to make voting easier for the American people. He did that on the anniversary of Selma, the march that we know the icon John Lewis helped to lead, and he wanted to make sure that he took action and not just words. So, as you know, the president is very attuned to this. But again, I don't want to get into specifics of what is currently happening in one race. The access to voting is being attacked.
But doesn't that record turnout show that Georgia voters are are finding ways to vote even with the
Look,
restrictions.
I'm not going to get into specifics of what Georgia voters are doing. What I am saying is that, generally speaking, again, more broadly speaking, of course, high turnout and voter suppression can take place at the same time.
High voter turnout and voter suppression can take place at the same time. Now, again, this is something that I have talked about quite a bit on my channel, right? Especially when addressing Stacey Abrams and her election voter suppression conspiracies that she likes to push without any real facts or evidence to back it up, okay? Including losing in court, right? Continuously losing in court. Democrats don't have anything, okay? Listen. In theory, can you have higher voter turnout and voter suppression? Yes, because some votes can be suppressed, but if more people are going to vote in general, then I guess theoretically you can have higher turnout. However, the Democrats are arguing that the GOP and their election integrity laws are stopping people from voting. People don't have the right to vote, okay? So if you're going to make a claim like that, you have to come with numbers. You have to tell us how many votes have been suppressed, because if voter turnout is increasing, obviously what the GOP is doing, if the intent is to stop people from voting, if it is to keep people from voting, it's not working, right? And if that's the intent, they should stop doing it, right? Because they're bad at it, right? So again, I need numbers, right? And Karine Pierre keeps saying, I can't go into details. I can't go into details. Well, you should, because if people are finding a way to vote anyways, don't you think that it would be smart to go into details in regards to how they're being able to vote so that people know how to vote? Don't you think that would be important? Okay, to tell people, look, all of this voter suppression is everywhere, all of these roadblocks, this is how people are finding a way to vote anyways. You would think that the people that's so concerned about protecting the right to vote and getting people out to vote would say that. But again, she doesn't have any specifics because it's made up. All of it is made up. There is no voter suppression, or put it this way, there is no evidence that the GOP election integrity laws are actually suppressing people, is actually stopping people from vote. Just because you put extra hoops in place or more roadblocks in place, or you put more, security procedures in place to protect elections, that doesn't mean that that's going to actually stop people from voting, because it is your responsibility to understand your local and state election laws so that you can be properly registered to vote. That is up to the citizen. It's not like people are following all the rules and then they're going to vote and then they're saying, nah, you can't vote, right? That's not happening, right? That's not happening. Yes, some people will have to wait in long lines. Yes, some people will have their ballot scrutinized more than others because they made a mistake, because they didn't follow the rules. But that doesn't mean that is stopping them from voting. That doesn't mean they're being turned away simply because they're black, which is what the Democrats are trying to imply. This is what they're trying to tell the American people. And again, the mainstream liberal media is so fed up with the Democrats and their lies, right? Because the mainstream liberal media, they can't defend the lies anymore without also themselves losing more credibility. And we know they can't afford to lose more credibility. They really don't have any at all, right? They have to call out the lies. The lies have become so egregious. They become so bad that the mainstream liberal media is like, you know what? We got to call cap, right? We got to call cap on some of this BS coming from the Biden administration. And it is really beautiful when that happens, because they don't do it enough, right? They don't do it enough. So with that being said, Karine Pierre, I think her days as the affirmative action press secretary are numbered. She's just doing a terrible job. She simply is at the point where she doesn't know how to answer questions. She's not answering questions. There's no point in even having a press conference with her, because you're never going to get the answers, right? They should have hired the straight white male, John Kirby. I think we get more answers out of him, right, than we do out of the affirmative action hire. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.